just say test, test.
Test, test.
Are you ready to go live in the back? Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the staff meeting for 2/22/22. I want to welcome everyone in the audience, and I'll turn it over to the manager, and he'll let us know what we're doing today. One other thing is that there's 3 or 4 of us on the bench that have to be done by around 10, a little after, so I want to keep that in mind. So, Mr. Manager?
We'll talk fast, Chairman. Good morning, Commission. Two main items today that we'd like to discuss. The district attorney is here. He had a conversation with Commissioner Howell a couple of weeks ago, and he just wants to talk high level about some challenges, again, with the backlog, dealing with some of the court cases, this in reference to acquisition and procurement of defense counsel. So he has a short presentation this morning. And then Susan Erlenwine and Public Works is here to talk about what is on a consent item for tomorrow's meeting on the dewatering project, and are here to give a presentation and answer any questions. And if it's not 10 o'clock yet, we just would very quickly going to brief over what the en banc is going to be for Thursday. If we don't get to that, it'll be fine. So with that, we'll start with the district attorney, if that's okay, Chairman.
Thank you. Good morning, Mark, and welcome.
Good morning, Commissioners. Last week, I believe it was, at CJCC, we were discussing some of the challenges in the criminal justice system. And most of our discussions in CJCC, and really in any setting over the last 3 to 5 years, have been focused primarily on mental health and substance abuse and the challenges associated with that. But I did want to bring to the attention of CJCC another issue that we're facing in Sedgwick County, and frankly, it's an issue statewide, and from what I'm hearing, at least regionally, I can't say it's a nationwide issue, but I know it's an issue in pockets of the country, and that is the lack of qualified defense attorneys who are willing and able to take the cases that are pending before the court. We have somewhere on the order of about 2,700 pending cases. That's when I'll also clarify too, about 2,200 of those. The simplest way to put this is we have 500 more cases on file than we have defendants, meaning there are somewhere on the order of about 500 people who have at least 2 cases. Now there may be some guys with 5 or 6. But the point is we have 500 more cases filed than we do defendants. So there's actually 2,200 people pending in Sedgwick County right now. To handle higher level cases, there's regulations at the state level that require a person before they can be appointed as a defense attorney. Now, if you want to go hire someone on your own, you can pick and choose who you want to hire. And if the person you choose to hire doesn't have those qualifications, that's between you and that attorney. But if the state is going to appoint an attorney, then that person has to have certain qualifications, primarily refers to having a number of cases that they have tried or handled in the past. And so, very quickly, and by the way, this is really more informative today. I want to kind of get the conversation started. I'll give you a quick overview of what has taken place since Jim and Commissioner Cruz was at the same presentation. Since we spoke, I've had various conversations with the folks at BIDS and some of the attorneys in town. But to set the stage, we have a public defender's office funded by the state of Kansas. Then, when there's a conflict between that office and maybe one of their clients, meaning they have represented the victim in a prior case, or there's a 2-defendant case, they can't represent both of them. You know, if there's a conflict, a legal conflict, then we have a conflicts office as well. 4 to 5 lawyers, also paid for by BIDS, Board of Indigent Defense Services money, state money. Then finally, we have a law firm, Cotton and Creer, 2 attorneys here in town who kind of take the leftover cases, you know, when there's a conflict or there's more than one defendant or they've gone through a couple of lawyers. But there is also, though, a need for, historically, lawyers to be on the appointments list. And that's just a list of attorneys in town who are willing to take cases by appointment. They then work at the BIDS fee, and it's a set fee that the BIDS pays out to lawyers. The problem has been with the backlog and with the shutdown during COVID, we could work a lot of cases, but we were unable to get all of them through the system. And so even though it was incremental and it took a long time to get there, because we were moving a lot of cases, and I can tell you compared to other parts of the country, we were open far more for business than many parts of the country, and so we were able to move a lot of cases through the system. But over time, it did get to the point where the Public Defender's Office was unable to take more cases. They shut down for a period of time. They could not accept more cases. They were maxed out. Conflicts Office did the same. Cotton and Pittman, Cotton and Creer, I'm not sure that they were shut down, but 2 people can only take so much. And so it was falling to the list on the appointments list. Those attorneys, just private attorneys here in Wichita, took hundreds of cases. But at some point, they all maxed out as well and could not take more. We are at this stage down to, and it has been for, I don't know exactly how long, but somewhere in the order of maybe the last 2 months. We're down to the point where we have one lawyer in Wichita who is taking the highest level cases, and he at this point has over 150 cases where a life sentence is pending, is a potential penalty for the people he's representing. That is not a workable situation, not for a community of 500,000 people. And so, as I pointed out in the CJCC the other day, we are at a crisis situation, and Judge Gehring is going to have to either start calling attorneys and saying, I'm appointing you whether you want to be or not. And some of you may have there may be some folks with a real philosophical concern about that, telling people in private practice, they've gone, they have their own business, being told that they have to take certain cases. I think the judge probably has the power and the inherent power of the court to do that, but it's not something I think he wants to do, certainly. Obviously, the question is, how do we get more of these lawyers willing to take these cases? And as one pointed out to me, if I'm going to get paid $1,500 to go try a jury trial, that's less than I get paid for and by the way, a jury trial on a serious, high-level Jessica's Law and murder case, $2,000 or $3,000 even. He said, that's less than I can get for a first-time DUI. That takes a tenth of the amount of time in preparation. And so money is one of the things. I have been in it. So that was, I laid it out for the CJCC and wanted you all to know that this was an issue. And that's when Commissioner Howell asked if I would explain this to the commission as a whole. So what do we do about it? Well, since that conversation, I've had extensive conversations with the bar. I've exchanged many emails with the lawyers here in town who do criminal defense. I've also spoken at length to Heather Cessna. She is the director of the Board of Indigent Defense Services. And she has got money, and she is willing to negotiate with lawyers at a higher rate and sort of, one of the lawyers put it this way, call it a surge mentality. Just attack this issue right now, put as many bodies onto this as we can, pay them what we need to, and get it done. That does not involve the county, does not involve this commission. But at some point, she's tied to a fiscal year, June to June. And so her budget, she's over halfway through her budget cycle and is on the tail end of her year. And she's not sure what's going to happen next year. I have written letters to the legislature and asked them to fully fund her and meet all of her budgetary requests so that the attorneys that she needs can be hired to work in the public defender's office and the conflicts office, but also the money she needs to retain private lawyers across the state and specifically in Wichita and Sedgwick County so that we can keep this process rolling. We cannot function without enough prosecutors, judges, and defense attorneys. This is a three-pronged table, a three-legged table, and without one leg of the table will fall. And so before I come to you at some point and go, we are in an absolute crisis situation, what do we do? I wanted you to know. And there are other consequences. I don't want to be all hyperbolic and gloom and doom here, but if attorneys have too many cases, there will come a claim at some point. We call them 1507s in Kansas. That's a statutory reference. But that's simply the statute that refers to ineffective assistance of counsel claims. And at some point, someone will claim that their lawyer had too many cases to adequately represent them and be fully prepared. And if those cases start to be overturned 10 years down the road, 5 years down the road, then there is another consequence to the state, not just to Sedgwick County, but to the state, and that is that people will come in and claim they were unlawfully convicted. And if I can't recreate the wheel 5 years down the road, if the victim's no longer available or doesn't remember or is just uncooperative and is unwilling to go through this whole process again, which one could certainly understand, especially in violent sex crimes and things like that. We're in a situation where the statute does not say for the payment for people who have been unlawfully convicted. It does not make a distinction between whether they're actually innocent or not. If they were convicted and then that conviction was overturned later and they did time, the state of Kansas pays them. And so there's a consequence, financial consequence as well. And so I just thought if I'm on the county commission and I know I'm thinking of making I know just last week, the commission addressed the expansion of the courts throughout the court's house and moving non-court personnel out of the courthouse. You are making decisions every day about how criminal justice is vetted and handled and adhered to in Sedgwick County, and I think this is part of that equation. So at some point, if there is and I'll bring this to the court, to you folks' attention shortly, but if there is a point at which her budget is not able to meet the demands, there may be an opportunity for ARPA funds. There are ARPA funds, as I understand it, set aside through the district court where they can pay some on the back end. The only downside, as I understand it from speaking to the folks who know about this far better than I, the ARPA funds through the district court cannot be utilized until bids is out of money. And I asked, is the money for Sedgwick County segregated from other monies within this bid system? And it's not. And so bids would have to spend down its money before they can receive ARPA funds through the district court allocation. I don't know that the same would apply for county funds obtained through ARPA. But I'm not making an ask now. I want it on your radar so it's not a surprise at some point. But, this is an issue that obviously concerns me a great deal. And, I'm not going to, I think frankly it speaks for itself. It's a concerning issue. So I wanted to bring it to your attention. I'll stand for any questions. And like I said, I'll be back at some point this next month or two as more clarity begins to develop. If lawyers can get paid, what I'd really like to see is 10 or 20 lawyers in Wichita willing to take even 10 cases at a time. As one pleads or works out, add another one. I'm not asking them to overwhelm their practice. Many of them do civil practice, many of them have other private paying clients. But every little bit helps, the old expression, many hands make light work. If we could get more folks contributing to this, it would certainly help. So, any questions?
Thank you. Commissioner Cruz.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mark, for being here. It's kind of ironic that the first email that I opened this morning was about lawyer salary and somebody moving to a different position because of more pay. So what is the bids rate?
It's statutorily right now $100 an hour. There has been, for the last year, as I understand it, a agreement with the legislature that she could pay $120. That either extends or lapses this legislative session. That's to be determined. She is asking for them to not only to keep it at what is now temporarily $120, but she wants it to go to $150. As it was explained to me by one of the lawyers in town quite succinctly, if he's on the appointments list for federal crimes, gets paid $158 an hour with a cap of $12,000 on non-tried cases. And if it's a tried case, then it's even more. It's whatever it takes per hour. His point was the state's cap is somewhere around $4,000, and he said the state essentially is saying to private lawyers that your time is worth a third of what the federal government thinks is a reasonable amount. He goes, I won't do it for that. I can't blame him. So not only does the hourly rate need to go up, but the cap on what could be paid out goes up as well. This is nothing that you're really in a position to vote on, but it's certainly something you could let the folks that you know in the legislature know how important it is in Sedgwick County, and frankly, how important it is across the state. We have issues here. The issues here is the number of cases, but if you are practicing or if you are a legislator from western Kansas or southeast Kansas, the issue down there is not enough lawyers at all in the first place. And one of the prosecutors out in western Kansas told me once, I don't have the caseloads you have, but I have a hard time with calendars. I only have one defense lawyer who works 8 counties, and I have one judge who works 8 counties. And so we have to get our calendars together. When are you going to be here next, and when are you going to be here next, and get all 3 people together at the same time. So different issues around the state, but fundamentally it comes back to the same thing, not enough personnel to do the work.
Okay, well, I guess the crux of this is that the 1507 statute, and I wonder how many times this has ever really come about. But I'd like to talk with you more about this offline so we don't take a lot of time today. I appreciate you being here. Thanks.
You bet.
Thank you. Commissioner Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just 2 questions. The 2,200 that you mentioned a minute ago, how many of those are currently in detainment in the jail?
I think the CJC numbers the other day were 1,500 are in custody. They're not all Sedgwick County. I'd have to defer to the sheriff to take, what's city, what's county. There may be some folks on federal holds, but, the lion's share will be county.
I'm just saying that some of these people may be out on bond,
Oh,
for
yes.
example. So,
Yes.
I mean, I just wonder what percentage of our 1,500 in custody are part of these 2,200?
Yeah, I don't want to shoot from the hip, but I'll tell you, it should have been included in the CJCC handout we got, I guess it was 2 weeks ago. So.
All right. You mentioned earlier about the speedy trial legislation that you had passed a year ago, and there's a deadline on that. So they may extend that potentially. They may not. But if they don't, that changes the metrics here just a little bit. Can you talk about that?
Sure. One of the issues we're having is if we have enough defense lawyers, it helps the process move faster. If I'm a defense attorney, I have 150 cases, for instance, and all of them are serious cases. I mean, everything's serious, but relatively speaking, very serious in terms of the amount of time that my clients are facing. My ability to try cases is limited by time and the calendar. I can only try 50 cases a year. Now, I will say that the idea of a defense attorney trying 50 cases a year is asinine. To the average person, they go, why not just work every week? You have to prepare. To prepare for a murder case is a 3 or 4 week affair, uninterrupted. And that assumes you've been working on it weeks in advance. You can't wait till the 3 or 4 weeks beforehand to get started. Just by way of example, I was given a cold case in the late 90s, I remember, and it had a box this big, and I thought, the only way I'm going to get through this is the old adage, eat an elephant, one bite at a time. Every day at 4 o'clock, I sat down and read for an hour, and I did that for months so that I could read through it by the time, so I was ready 12 months later when the trial was going to take place. I tried 20 some odd jury trials, I think 21, something like that, 22, my first year in the office. That was a breakneck pace. To try 10 or 12 serious felonies in the course of a year is about what a person can handle. 2008, I tried 2 capital murders and a child death murder in the same year, on top of half a dozen other cases. And I lost 20 pounds, and maybe I need to do that again and get healthy, I guess. But it is not reasonable to assume that these defense attorneys can simply go try 50. Let's split up this 150 cases, split it between 3 guys, and we'll just knock them out one week after another. Realistically, they can try about 10, 15 cases a year, and that's if they are absolutely killing themselves to stay on top of things. So the backlog, this is a big speech. To answer your question, you're not going to work that backlog down unless I have more bodies to throw at this. Defense attorneys, prosecutors, everybody. And the only other way around is just to simply not file cases and say certain cases are just not going to make it. There's going to be no justice for those victims. That is just not a place I want to be.
Well, so again, the speedy trial legislation, though, there is a date coming that if you don't.
A year from July, I believe. Yes.
Okay, so it seems like we have a decision to be made that either there's going to have to be more money pumped into the system, or that deadline have to move out some. Constitutionally, I'd like to see us pump money into the system, because I think people have a right to get their day in court.
Cases heard, yes, sir.
So that's a better option. And of course, the state has ARPA money also. Do we have someone lobbying on the state side to solve this specifically for Sedgwick County?
For Sedgwick County, I'll defer to the manager on that. I don't know if the county's lobbyist if this is something that's on his agenda specifically. I can tell you Heather Cessna has spoken to Senate Ways and Means and House. I'll get you the name of the budget. It's Shannon Francis's commission or committee. Excuse me. I'm just blanking on the name of it. I think it's Ways and Means, but
It's Senate Ways and Means and House Appropriations.
House Appropriations. Yeah. So anyway, it's before both of those committees right now.
I guess I would just dovetail that funding request with a separate request and saying if they do not fund this, then we need to have them adjust the dates in that speedy trial legislation. So they can do a policy solution, which I don't think is the right answer.
Sure.
But they have to do one or the other. If they don't do one, they have to do the other before they adjourn. And I guess we need to make sure that they understand that. So,
Well, and I think there's, we can talk more about this, but
I would ask our management and our communications staff to make this part of I'd like to see this part of our legislative platform, because I didn't know about this when we were talking about the platform. This is new information. I think this is urgent.
Yeah.
And I know that to the extent we might want to consider using county ARPA funds, if that's even legal, we have to get that figured out. So we need someone at the county level to take the idea and vet that, find out what our options are before we run out of time. And so I think that there's the chance we might want to do that. We probably ought to have that verified one way or the other. So the manager, we have some work to do here.
I know Lindsay's been researching the ability to use ARPA funds. She can report out on that the next time she reports out on ARPA. I will let Jason know that we're tracking this. We have not, unless Tanya wants to correct me. I don't think we've talked about this with the lobbyist.
Until CJCC meeting, I didn't know about this. And so to me, this is new information, and I think it's urgent. I mean, this is about public safety. It's about, if we don't solve this thing one way or the other, we have a problem with the state having liability down the road. We have possibly him not trying cases. You know, there's no other good options out there. The only good options are fund it or delay it, which I don't like that. So anyway, it's certainly a priority. Thank you, DA, for coming and explaining that to us this morning. Appreciate it. Yes, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Cruz?
Thank you. One quick final question.
Sure.
Out of the
Everybody's fine.
2,700 pending cases, how many of those have a drug-related charge in the case?
I can find out. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. I know you know that over the last, I think it's 5 years, we have tracked, maybe it goes back 6 years even, but we have tracked, kind of spot checked year to year, and it's always been in the high teens. I would say this year may be a little bit lower, only because we have worked for as many creative ways as we can to avoid filing drug cases, just possession cases. We've sent a lot through the city. They've worked with us, to their credit, on this, and with the police department. So they may be a little bit lower, but no, you're hitting it on the head. I mean, drugs are absolutely one of the prime drivers of crime in the city. And so I have no reason to believe that substantively there's been any downturn at all in the number of drug-related serious crimes in Sedgwick County. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me if it was a hair higher than what it's been. But before I shoot from the hip, I'll get you specific numbers and bring that to your attention.
Okay, and the reason why I bring that up is because we have to fund what's in front of us, but we have to start funding rehabilitation. We have to start funding those things on the front end so that we don't perpetuate this and continue budgeting for consequences. So I appreciate you being here again, and thank you for bringing that to my attention. I can't wait to see what those numbers pan out to be.
We'll get them.
Thanks.
Well, thank you. I don't see any other questions right now. We'll ask the manager and Lindsay to work with the DA office if there's something that we can do to help alleviate the issues. So we'll keep this on our radar. I appreciate you bringing it to our attention today.
Very good. Very last question, or last thing. I know Commissioner Howell asked about a couple of things on the consent agenda a few weeks ago concerning asset forfeiture. We're working on those numbers for you, and I'll be in a position to answer any questions you have about that. It's a budgetary thing right now. I think the consent part of it's simply a budgetary issue, just so we can always say where the money's at. But I think your question was a little different than that, had more to do with where is it coming from, and I'll be in a position to answer those questions at any point. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Mr. Manager, what do we have
Bring
next?
Susan right on up and talk about the dewatering.
Morning, Susan.
Good morning. How are you today?
Good.
Thank you. This, as the manager mentioned, has to do with an item on the agenda tomorrow, South Bluff groundwater study, which concerns stormwater. And if you think of stormwater, normally people think of surface water with rivers overflowing their banks, flooding damage caused by that. But there are other issues associated with too much water. And that's what's happening down in the south part of Sedgwick County. From these photos, you can see a lot of water in basements, and that's not due to surface water running into the basements, but it's due to groundwater rising up from the bottom and soaking into the basements. You can see these are pictures from District Number 2 down in Peach Valley Estates. Here you can see the watermark went all the way up to the light switch, and the picture on the right shows sand that was pushed up from cracks in the bottom of the basement. So it causes a lot of financial damage, and people often put in 2 to 3 sump pumps trying to get rid of that water. And this is photos from Peach Valley Estates yards. You can see ankle deep with water standing in the yards. And when you run sump pumps, picture on the left showing from sump pumps that's just dumping into the yards or into ditches. And what happens to that water is going to soak back down into the ground, and you're recycling the problem. So over the years, the county has received requests from citizens as to how can you help us with these issues that we're facing. One request was turn on the Derby water wells. Brief history, Derby had their own water wells. The water was very hard. So a couple decades ago, they worked an agreement with Wichita to buy the water from Wichita for their citizens. But in that contract, they were not allowed to turn on their water wells. And so people in the area said that, well, it's because the Derby wells aren't on, that's what's causing our flooding. But I've talked to people that said, no, the flooding was happening prior to that. But the county did pay for running 2 Derby water wells for 4 months back in late 2016 at a cost of $21,742. Majority of that was the monthly electric bill to run the wells. About $2,000 of that went to Derby to reimburse them for servicing the wells. The public has also asked us to ask the farmers to pump their wells during these storms. Well, when you have excess rain, that's not the time a farmer wants to be pumping his water and putting excess water on his field. Division of Water Resources does allow a farmer to have a joint dewatering well / producing well, but they need a special permit for that. Again, the question comes up, who's going to pay for the farmer to pump his wells, and where is the water going to go? So that's an issue. And they have asked us, the county, for help over time, and we have funded 2 groundwater studies. Now, first looking at what the problem is, you can see on this diagram, you have water in the basement, and that's because the static groundwater elevation is just below that area. And you have water, when you just add a little bit more to that groundwater elevation, it goes up. Remember, groundwater doesn't stay in one place. It moves through the sandy soil. In Sedgwick County, it's basically northwest to southeast. So you could have rain north of an area and flooding south of it as the groundwater moves through. Dewatering wells is a way to help cure this. The upper diagram shows a well in the ground where you have a static water table. It will go up and down with added water, or during a drought it will lower. Below that you have, if you have a well pumping it, you create a cone of depression. And that cone of depression is kind of like you drinking something out of a glass with a straw. If you look down, you'll see kind of a depression around the straw. It's drawing down the liquids. How big that cone of depression is depends on the sand, how much porosity and permeability is in there to allow the water to move, how big the well is, and the pumping rate. So there's a lot of variables to determine how deep it goes and how far horizontally that depression will stretch. So what happens when a well is pumped? As you see in the diagram, the well's pumping, but over on the right side, if someone had a private water well, which most people do in this area, the well could go dry if you have the cone drawing the water down too far. So you can't just put a well anywhere in the ground. You have to research as to what size of well, the best location, how far out it's going to reach, and make sure no harm is done by the fact that you have private water wells in the area. So the aquifer properties, you can look at the conductivity and the thickness. Now, I'm not going to go into the math, which is over on the left, but you can see there are different formulas people have used to determine how big the cone of depression is. Several people have studied this area. Dr. Andrew Swindle, who teaches hydrogeology at WSU, he ran the numbers and determined that The Derby wells, if they're turned on, the reach would be 1/2 mile to 7/10 of a mile in that cone of depression. And that's it. It's not going to reach several miles away. So if you look at that, this map shows 2 red dots. Those are 2 Derby water wells that the county turned on previously. The yellow dots are homes near those 2 wells. And then the different color lines show if you were running these 2 pumps for 60 days, how far down the groundwater would be pulled. The outer green ring is only 1 foot after pumping for 60 days. Close by in the light blue color near the wells is 4 feet in 60 days. So again, from the diagram, it shows that the further out you are, the less effect you will have on drawing the water down. That's why there are math formulas to determine, looking at the hydrology of the area, where you should place the wells. And when you place a well, it's not good enough just to have the well. You need to control when it comes on and when it goes off. So the domestic water wells on the left, over on the right you have a dewatering well. You need to know how far down below the basement you want to keep the water. So if it's 2 feet or 4 feet, you would, it's like a sump pump, set a point where the groundwater goes up to a certain point, the well comes on and starts drawing the water down. But you don't want to draw it down below the drinking water wells, so you have a turn-off point so it stops pumping to make sure you don't draw it down below the water wells. So you need water well data on all of the wells in the area, and the hydrology is quite complicated. And this map of Sedgwick County was produced by Kansas Geological Survey, and it's showing the unconsolidated sediments, meaning the sands and gravels, that you would see along any river or stream. Over time, rivers and streams meander back and forth. They're depositing the sand. That sand is more porous and permeable than clay. And the higher the number, the thicker the unconsolidated area, and the more porous and permeable the material is. So the study area was based on where you have the higher numbers, 100 or above, and this is what's called the South Bluff area that's proposed for the study. On the left, near the top, you see hydraulic and a yellow outlined area. That's Peach Valley Estates, one of the areas we've done a study on. To the right of that, there's a blue outline area, and that's Hancock Acres, which we've also done a study on. So only on the northern part of this area. Looking closely at Peach Valley Estates, on the aerial view on the right, you see it outlined in red. Notice there are homes to the north and to the east of it. One of the homes that was most affected in Peach Valley Estates for high water levels in their basement is in the northeast part of Peach Valley Estates, where you have homes just across the road from that. So the question is, how large is the extent of this problem, and where should the wells be placed? In Peach Valley Estates, the recommendation from the study was 3 wells, and we hired professional engineering consultants, known as PEC, to do this study in 2017. The cost of the study was $22,500. There were 155 lots in this area. The cost for implementing this was $2.1 million. And if you divide that out through the lots, it's just over $13,500 per lot. They could pay that up front or be part of a bond to repay in 20 years, assuming 4% interest. That would be an additional $83 a month each house would have to pay for this part on the benefit district. The improvement district, though, you would need to help pay for running the electricity, for setting aside money to replace pumps as they wear out, any other damage, and that was estimated $28 to $40 a month. You may have some years you're not running it at all, except maybe occasionally to make sure everything's running correctly. look at Hancock Acres on the right side, which is Peach Valley is here on the left. Now let's move over to Hancock Acres. You can see they're just south of the Mitch Mitchell floodway, nicknamed the Big Ditch. To the east of them is the Arkansas River, and the light blue area is showing the 100-year floodplain. They had flooding in their basements, and the PEC again was hired to do the study. Cost was $31,800. There were 99 lots, much fewer than Peach Valley Estates. So even though the cost was $1.6 million, and each study had multiple possibilities of how you get rid of the water, which varied the final cost. In this case, at 1.6 divided by 99 lots is over $18,000 per lot. Doing the bond 20 years, it'd be $112 a month because you're spreading it out over fewer lots. Estimated cost for maintaining it, $42 a month. In both these cases, Peach Valley and Hancock Acres, we had public hearings. We worked with citizens in these areas. They went door to door with a petition, seeing if they could get 50% of the people to sign up to go into a benefit district and an improvement district, and they did not reach that 50% mark. Kansas Water Office became involved with this recently, and they have a water research fund, and so they dedicated money from their water research fund to study a larger area and get away from just doing the neighborhoods, but let's look at an overall area where people are affected. They've given a grant to Sedgwick County to do this study. We've received $92,800, which is the estimated cost of this study per our conversations with PEC. Now, we would like to hire PEC again to perform the study since they have worked in this area on the previous two studies. They are currently hired by the city of Derby on where to place their new water wells, and do they leave the wells where they currently are or move them. They would know the depth, they know the hydrogeology of the area to determine what's available. They are also working with the city of Hayesville on their water issues. So they are the most versed in this area. So why is this called South Bluff Study? If you notice on the right side of the diagram, you have the row of bluff going down to about 103rd ends. There are people in that area who have flooding. And there are people in other areas we've heard of. South of Peach Valley Estates, there's homes with flooding. So that's kind of the center point, and that's why the name of the study. Kansas Water Office would like us to call it that. And I have a typo here. Instead of Pleasant Valley Estates, that should be Peach Valley, although it is kind of a pleasant area. You have a comparison from the appraiser's office of number of parcels that have been studied in Peach Valley Estates and Hancock Acres versus the number of parcels in the entire area. So 159 in Peach Valley, 92 in Hancock Acres. Combine those, that's 19% of the total area that we're looking at. And you can look at that in different ways if you want to base it on total improvement values or total land assessment. You can go through this chart to determine that. Number of single-family residents is 23.6% of the area already studied compared to the entire area. So we've looked at a small area. The state would like to use the data from this research as a template for other areas of the state. We're not the only area in the state with high groundwater levels causing flooding in basements. So the results of this would be used to help other areas through the Kansas Water Office. South Bluff study benefits by studying the larger area determining the best locations that would help the most people, incorporate those future Derby water wells, since PEC's got the data already for that, and City of Derby has, I've talked to them, they said, yes, we can have that data. So incorporate the existing data from Peach Valley Estates and Hancock Acres. We would have a citizens committee with people from the unincorporated area, from the South Bluff area that's concerned about this, from Peach Valley, Hancock Acres, City of Derby, City of Hayesville, to meet regularly and then have larger meetings for the citizens of the area, and options for removing the generated water. Where will it go? Some people don't like it going to streams or rivers. Some have suggested lakes. Of course, a lake in a sandy area, we have an issue of the water going back into the ground unless you have good liners, bentonite clay to prevent that. And they'll determine the cost of each option, and that will be presented to us and the citizens to determine next steps. So that's a brief overview. Like I said, this is on your agenda tomorrow for a contract with PEC to perform the study. Once its contract is signed, PEC has 9 months to complete the study. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Susan. Commissioner Howell?
Thank you, Chairman. A number of questions here. Thank you for the presentation. On that comparison page that you showed,
Yes.
I note that there's less single-family residences than there are parcels. On those proposals earlier, where it showed the 155 lots, does every one of those have a single-family home?
No. If you look at the number of lots, like under Peach Valley Estates, number of parcels 159, active addresses is 144, single-family residence is 141.
Yeah, I see it there, but the other page said 155. That's why I'm a little confused.
The other page was based on when we did the study. Maybe something happened in between, breaking of parcels.
So we don't know in either one of these two previous editions, the Peach Valley or Hancock, how many of the homes had a groundwater infiltration into their basements. We don't know how many of them actually had that problem.
No.
Okay.
In Hancock Acres, they did, when they went door to door, try to determine, did you have a little bit of water or a lot? They did get some data, but not everyone was home when they went through the area. So we have some limited data on that.
Did you ever try to send out a letter to ask them to respond respond on some type of a survey?
No, that was up to the citizens who lived in the area, the committee that they made.
Okay. Do we know when the Derby plans to turn on? You mentioned on that one page, towards the end there, the incorporate future Derby water wells. Do we know about when that might happen?
No, the PEC has been working on that. And of course, once Derby does turn them on, they would have a water treatment plant. So it may be a couple of years or so before all of that takes place. But as you know, Derby had a hard water problem, and that's why they did the contract with Wichita to supply water. In this case, I'm not sure of the time scale on when those would actually be pumping.
Do we have an idea within the South Bluff study area that shows a red line around a roughly 16, I'm sorry, how many square miles are there, but anyway, 12 square miles roughly, I'd say. Do we know where within that boundary that the study wells will be placed? PEC is talking about putting in 2 wells under this study.
Yeah, no.
Do you know
we
where
do not.
about they're going to be, where they'll be located at this point?
No. I do know that one of those wells, the pump has gone bad and Derby has not replaced the pump. I know that PEC may just close down one of those wells, and you'd only be left with one in that area, if that. So the whole new study, you may have all new wells in different locations.
I was under the impression that this study would be using agricultural water wells.
Oh, you mean
Maybe
the,
currently in place. They're currently in place, but agricultural water wells.
you mean what was proposed by?
On this study today, we're proposing this 90.
No. No, we would not be using current
So
agricultural
they're going to
wells.
place 2 new wells somewhere to do the study for this.
Yeah.
We don't know where that will be, though, within the
No.
South Bluff area?
Not until a study's done.
Okay, I'm a little confused. This proposal today, the groundwater study, spends $90-some thousand to study dewatering within the South Bluff area. Are they going to be using existing wells, or are they installing some new wells to do this study, this proposal?
They won't be installing any wells to do the
The
study.
no wells, okay,
They'll be using data from existing wells,
okay.
and we can get that from the Kansas Geological Survey. When a well's drilled, the person who drills the well is supposed to supply the data showing the type of material that they drilled through, the depth of the well, where the static water table was when they drilled the well. I said supposed to, some of the drillers don't do that. I've been to the KGS site and looked at the well data from Peach Valley Estates and Hancock Acres.
So when you and I spoke earlier, I was under the impression they were going to locate two wells, whether it be existing or new. They were going to pump them for a long period of time and actually measure the cone of depression and all that. I talked to Senator Dan Kirshen for about an hour on this, and that was actually his impression as well. So they were going to use existing wells, he thought, and they would study the effects of dewatering. That's not the plan, though.
PEC may do that. That data's really already exists from the old pumping of the Derby water wells.
Okay. One of the concerns I have is, you talked about, one of the analysts earlier said about a little over a mile, they would have a 1 foot, the water would drop by roughly 1 foot within the soil. The water level would drop about 1 foot after 60 days of pumping to about a mile away from the water well.
It was like 0.8 of a mile, yeah.
I guess I'm wondering about this 12 square miles. Right now, we don't know. The red line that was drawn around this, we don't know what extent, how many of these homes actually have this problem. And we have no idea. And arguably, if they don't have a problem, they're not going to want to pay for long-term capital improvement and long-term operation of this system. So one of the things I would ask is, before they spend a lot of money studying solutions, I think we need to find out the scope of the problem, and nobody really knows that. And let me also make a comment here. The two studies we did before weren't just studies, they were actually proposals. We actually proposed back to those residents 3 water wells at Peach Valley and 5 water wells at Hancock Acres. And why didn't they go in? Because we actually did a lot of work on this already. Why did they not go in?
I think in a few cases it was their basement did not have water problems. I talked to one citizen, and she said that her house had been built elevated, what I call an anthill, where the ground's been lifted up, and so the basement was higher, so she had no issues, and therefore she did not want to pay since she did not have issues. In other cases, it was because the price was too high, and they weren't capable of paying that.
So let me round this off. It's roughly $100,000. This is a state grant, and I understand if we don't spend this money within the time frame, that I guess it goes away. If we don't spend it,
We would have to return it to Kansas Water Office if we don't do the study.
So I would really like to see the county survey the homes in the area to find out to what extent they have a problem, and then what is their level of commitment to supporting some type of a capital improvement, a benefit district and improvement district. What is their level of support for such a solution if it was proposed? If we don't understand the magnitude of the problem, to me, we're spending roughly $100,000. Again, we say, well, state money, but it's still our tax dollars. It's just as important as any other tax dollars. I don't want to spend money if there's no appetite down the road for them to actually support a solution that's provided back to them. If there's no appetite for that, or if we say we support a multi-million-dollar solution to this problem, And a lot of the people are in the area are saying, we don't have a problem. Well, then that's not going to fly. The reason Hancock Acres and Peach Valley Estates did not go forward is because there wasn't 50% plus one of the residences that wanted to do it for whatever reason. Either they didn't have a problem or it was too expensive. And my question really is, what has changed? We have a larger area here, but we don't have any idea whether this larger area even has a problem. We did hear from residents, a lot of residents at Peach Valley and Hancock Acres. We know they have a problem, but I've not heard from a lot of people to the south of that. I see Joe wants to say something.
In terms of the scope of this problem, we know it goes at least as far south as 103rd and Hillside, because we've been working down there for a long time. Their basement's flooding. We did $1 million project to build a storm sewer to get to the river from 103rd and Hillside to try to help get surface water off. It is a widespread problem. And in my opinion, going down to the county line is just making sure we cover everything for which we have some responsibility down to the county line, which is just 2 miles farther south. The value of this is in being able to see sort of regionally what's happening and what might help the problem. And it's a low-cost way to do it, and it's not our money. And so when I look at this, I say it's less than $100,000. If you look at the solutions in either Hancock Acres or Peach Valley, that's 4 or 5 lots worth of capital investment from one of those. This is a minor expenditure to find out what's really happening out there and what might happen if Derby turns the wells on. You know, the thing that everybody down there thinks will fix the problem, we don't know if it will or not. But if we do the study, we might not know for sure, but we'll have a lot better idea. And it's just the best opportunity we've ever had to try to figure out what's happening in this whole neighborhood. But it is difficult to go ask people if they're interested if we can't tell them. I've never had success finding out, you know, would you do something? We don't know how much it's going to cost. Nobody wants to sign up for that. This is a way to get there.
Well, I think we should have sent a letter out before when we did the 2 studies prior. When we did the proposal, we should have sent out letters because people may not be home when you knock on the door. I get that. But you can send a letter to them and they should respond. If they don't respond, then I would interpret that as they're not interested in a solution and they don't have a problem. But you can find out to what level of how big of a problem is this? If they flooded one time in 30 years, they may not care as much. If they flood every time it rains, they're going to care a whole lot. So I think we can ascertain their level of commitment to having a solution, come back to them. But at the end of the day, we're talking again. The single-family homes are probably where you'll find potentially some support. You say there's 1,286 parcels, but if there's not a house sitting there with a basement, I don't think that someone's going to be interested in funding any of this if they don't have a home sitting there that potentially has a problem. So we could send out a letter to 651 homes and get the information from those people, give them a few weeks to respond. We would know a whole lot more about whether this makes sense or not. But if you don't get responses from people, then I don't know what we're doing here. And you say it's not our money. Yeah, it is. It is state tax dollars. So I disagree with that comment. And I also don't think it's a small amount of money. I can find all kinds of ways to spend $100,000 in doing things in my district. So at the end of the day, if this $100,000 was put towards capital for one of these solutions, that might be a better way to spend $100,000. We've already given them 2 solutions, and they didn't want to do them because it was too expensive. $100,000 might make it more affordable. So just an idea. But if the $100,000 was put towards one of the solutions already presented, maybe it becomes more interesting to those folks. I don't know. But right now, I just feel like we've already spent $66,000, and I want the people to know I support a solution for them. I feel like we've already given them a solution, and they didn't want it. And that's a real problem. And to me, this is just another chapter in spinning our wheels. Nothing substantially has changed other than the size of the district, and we don't right now. You said 130 Hillside. That's towards the middle of this region. You go way out to 119th Street South. I don't know that there's people out there that have a problem. If they don't have a problem, why would they want to pay for a solution that's to the north of them?
I don't think studying something means that everybody in that study area pays for anything. It probably identifies where the actual problem is, limits the scope of what needs to be done. And the other really, maybe the biggest value in this thing is to help with planning down there. Do we need to limit basement construction down there? And in what area should we do that to protect future, as this develops over time, to protect future homes that come in here? I don't know how you ever plan a capital, you have to do planning to do a capital project. And it usually starts kind of broader than what you actually think you end up needing to build.
All right, I would be more supportive if we would send out a letter as a first step. I don't think it's wrong to do that. Ask 651 homes to respond, to clarify to what magnitude is this a problem for you in your home. Let them clarify that first. Let's get that data first. Then I think if we can ascertain there's a problem that is outside Hancock Acres and Peach Valley, you said 130 in Hillside. I know there's a problem there too. But how many homes are actually impacted? And I think part of that letter ought to be, are you willing to support a solution with a benefit district or improvement district? And if the answer is no, then we know the answer already. So to the extent that these folks want the solution, are willing to pay for it, then this is a great idea. But we need to ask the question first. That's my only concern here. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Cruz?
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, real quick, just one of the questions I had was about our Charter 68 and the process in which that we select an organization to do these services. And so the under our Charter 68, it says under letter G, it talks about professional services. So I don't really see where it says we don't have to. Can you explain that to me around how we can go ahead and just pick a company because they've done it before? Do you understand the question?
Yeah, I understand,
Okay.
Commissioner Cruz, and it's a good question. We'll look at the charter. Professional services is exempt from the charter. Doesn't mean you can't go out for competitive proposals at time if you want to, but I think they'd probably be exempt under that, and that's probably the best exception, and probably the justification might be for that because they've already done so much work and they wouldn't have to be reinventing the wheel on this. But we'll certainly look at it from a Charter 68 perspective for you.
Okay, I'd like to do that.
And I'd like to add, I ran this by Joe Thomas and have in writing that he approved not going through this and hiring them through the exemption.
Okay. And then the other thing was just more on the Kansas. I went to the site and I was just looking up at the geological map. Mm-hmm. And it's the last map that's on here is from 1991. How often do they update these?
Not that often.
Okay, so like 50 years, 100 years?
I'd say 30 years.
Okay, so this one's 31 years old. Do you think that, I'm just wondering like how the landscape has changed in that time, how our environment has affected water flow. You know, I'm having a conversation later today about the big ditch and underutilization of that. So I'm just wondering, you know, how, and maybe that's what this study will show.
When I wrote the requirements for PEC, or who, at that time it was an unknown, but who would do this, it included the topography of the area, the geology, the hydrology. It was everything connected together to determine what would work best. So you're right, landscapes change. People come in and change the surface, not topography changes. So we put that in there that everything would be covered under the study for this area to see what it looks like today.
Okay, thank you so much for being here. And thanks, Jim, for all your explanations. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Commissioner Lopez?
Thank you. Well, first, I just want to thank you guys for all the work. I know you guys have been looking into this area for, I don't even know how long. I mean, it's just been such an ongoing issue. When I first got into the seat, I think this was the number one thing I continued to hear about from numerous people, and I've learned so much about groundwater that, I mean, more than I would have ever anticipated knowing in my life. So it's been really interesting, but I do think sending a letter first and asking people who are dealing with such a problem, I mean, just their basements are flooding. We've seen the pictures. A few pictures doesn't touch what's been going on in this area. So I'm asking if we would write a check, or if they would be willing to write a check but they don't know how much it would be. And I mean, any kind of surveying of people without data seems like a complete waste of money, in my opinion, because we have to pay to send that out. And then we don't really know what we're asking because we don't have the information to know what to ask to get the right answer. So I don't agree with that. And I also think just placing 2 wells in the 2 areas that have been studied and thinking that that's going to do it really neglects everybody else in this area. And I've spoken to numerous people who live outside of those 2 neighborhoods who are struggling with the same problem. So I don't see that as any way to fix this either. One question that came up quite a bit was what's changed? Well, I think a lot has changed. I mean, we see all this federal funding coming down right now that we've never seen before. When I was in D.C. last week, I talked to our lobbyist about groundwater issues, and I believe there's a meeting coming up to discuss that with staff, with Jim Davenport and staff, to see what we can do to address that. And there's so many different federal funding opportunities that are coming down. Just going there last week, I heard about new opportunities that weren't as widely known until, they're coming out every day. It seems like something new is coming out. So I think it discredits what could potentially come funding-wise from the federal government. And this is an issue that's been going on, like I said, for many, many years. And it's time that we take a more regional approach. And so I'm really happy that the state is wanting to get involved. And I hope that this study will help them in other areas that are having the same issue that we are across the state of Kansas. So thank you guys so much for all the work you do. And I look forward to seeing what comes of this. Thank you.
Thank you. A reminder that a couple of us are supposed to leave about 10, so Commissioner Howell.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll try to be quick. We do have a lot of information. We have the 2 studies, or let me say the 2 proposals. You could actually explain the proposals to those people, in the area and say, here's a proposal that was done on this date, and here's what here's what the results were. With a larger area, the cost might be slightly different. We might be less. We don't know. I think that you'll find out very quickly if people don't have a problem. And I think that how much would it cost to send out 651 letters? Wouldn't cost that much. And I think information is your friend. Without information, we don't know what we're doing. I think to ask people to explain the magnitude of their problem. If they've never had a problem, we should know that. If it's a small problem, they want to take care of it themselves, we should know that. I think the reality is we do have a lot of information. And to spend $100,000 because we don't want to spend $1,000, in my opinion, is backwards. So I'll continue to stand by my point that sending out a letter to get information is a first step. We should have done that last time. And I'm sorry we didn't do it already, but here we are, Chapter 3, and we're going to do the same mistake again. Thanks.
Thank you. Jim and Susan, thank you very much. Appreciate the information today. Mr. Manager, do you have any comments about the en banc? Or are you going to go to 2-1, or what are you going to do with that?
Well, I can send an email out to commissioners, it's briefly just to discuss what's going to happen on Thursday. I can do that via email. We can go ahead and convene today.
Sounds good. All right. Anything else come before the board today as a staff meeting? Seeing nothing, we're adjourned. Thank you all.